Okay, we are live. And I didn't screw it up this time. I got it right. So, hello and welcome to episode 13 of Fright Lounge, the show in which the best horrorologists in town will discuss horror in depth and get a conversation going for seasoned horror viewers, as well as helping introduce newbies to the horror genre. I, of course, am Rigor from the podcasts Then Is Now, The East Meets the West, and The Cult Movie Lounge. Unfortunately, my co-host here on the Fright Lounge, Bill Van Ryn, could not be here today, but I'm excited to let everybody know that the wife and I are actually going to be headed to the Riverside Drive-In in Pennsylvania for the April Ghouls Drive-In Monsterama, and we'll get to see Bill there in person and a whole bunch of other people, so I'm looking forward to that. But joining me today are the awesome team of My Kill and Spency. Welcome, guys.
Hello, hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Awesome. It's going great. And you know what? We're all three are up, and I have to remember how to change that. Hold on. Where's the view? I just want to, so that, when each one of us talks, where is that?
That's just a setting in,
Where is that setting?
what's it called?
Yeah, is the setting? Where is it? Find it.
View in the top right.
I know nothing.
View in the top. I don't see it. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
There's should be a little button that says view, and then you click speaker. So then it changes it to who the.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. Let me full screen this. That doesn't really help. View.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, for now, it's fine. I'll figure it out as we go. Oops. Okay, so I cannot minimize this while we're doing it. So anyways, tonight we are talking about, we've talked about a lot of horror movies on the show so far, but this show is about all kinds of horror media. I know, Spencer, you want to discuss horror games in future episodes. But today's topic is season 3 of the Doctor Who spinoff series Torchwood. And the subtitle is Children of Earth. And the reason we picked a sci-fi show as a topic tonight, it's because this particular one is truly chilling on several levels. And we'll really get into that as we talk about the episodes. It's a 5-episode story arc that's self-contained, which means you don't have to have watched Doctor Who or even the first 2 seasons of Torchwood to enjoy it. Right now, they're streaming on HBO Max. And all you really need to know is that Torchwood is a team that operates out of Cardiff, England, and defends the Earth from alien and human threats. And its leader, Captain Jack Harkness, is immortal. Spence, can you briefly tell us how Jack became immortal?
Yes, I can. Yes, Captain Jack Harkness is the leader of Torchwood 3, that is the designation within the show, in Cardiff, Wales. And he became an immortal starting on Doctor Who. He began as a time traveler and a con man from the 51st century, from the year 5094. Not quite sure where in the universe, but reportedly very, very far away. He comes to travel with the 9th Doctor in Doctor Who and Rose Tyler. As a consequence of his death and resurrection in the series 1 finale of Doctor Who, he becomes immortal and then is stranded in the 1800s on Earth. He becomes a member of Torchwood, the organization dedicated to combating alien threats, and he spends over a century waiting to reunite with the Doctor, over which he becomes the leader of Torchwood branch in Cardiff. And for the first 2 seasons of Torchwood, the only really important factor is that they build this team over time, and you have one of the main characters of series 3, Gwen Cooper. She's the newbie of the group, and she's our everyman. She gives us a view into this crazy world of aliens through the first and second season of Torchwood, and through that we're revealed a lot more about Jack and all of that stuff. And the key factor to remember with Jack's history, that since he's one of the key main characters, is that he was around the entire 20th century, reportedly, sticking around in Wales and all around the UK, and protecting Earth from all kinds of alien threats, most of which we actually don't know about as an audience. They try and keep that very vague, and that becomes relevant later on in Children of Earth.
Right. And there we go. I figured it out. Speaker, it was hidden. Yeah, so that's awesome. And Captain Jack is a great character. So let's
So I'm sorry, was he immortal from the get-go, or did something happen to him? Did I zone out, or did you? I'm sorry.
In the series 1 finale of Doctor Who, when Christopher Eccleston regenerates into David Tennant, that is when Captain Jack becomes immortal. Through the plot of Doctor Who, Jack had been an established character, and he gets killed by the Daleks, and through the shenanigans of the TARDIS, essentially brings him back, and he cannot die anymore. He becomes a fixed point in time, and that is how they explain it.
And didn't he jumped onto the TARDIS as it was traveling through time, right? And that's what kind of
happened later.
Oh, okay.
Jack was involved. So this is also a key. I guess it is relevant a little bit for fans of Doctor Who. They would remember Jack because yes, he was part of the series 1 finale. He was also a part of the series 2 finale with was it the series 2? No, it wasn't series 2. I'm sorry, series 3 finale with Martha Jones as the companion, because that was the finale where that's when he was holding onto the TARDIS because he can't die from it, from anything to do with it. And that is when they bring the Master back, which is a big Doctor Who character, and Jack was involved in that. And then for series 4, season 4 of Doctor Who, Jack was also involved in the Stolen Earth story.
Right.
And actually, Torchwood as a whole, Gwen Cooper also showed up, and that takes place just about between the series 2 and series 3, which we're going to talk about series 3. The earlier finales of Doctor Who, basically it alternates of you watch season 1 of Doctor Who, season 1 of Torchwood, and then you watch season 2 and 3 of Doctor Who, and then you watch Torchwood season 2, then you watch season 4 of Doctor Who, and then you get to Children of Earth.
But folks at home, if you just want to watch Torchwood season 3, go right ahead.
Yes, it's pretty self-contained. Yeah.
Children of Earth is very much one of my favorite television media stories ever because of that fact, because you don't need to be a big fan of Doctor Who. Torchwood as a whole does a really good job of not hitting the audience over the head with it, nor punishing them for not knowing something. That's how they do it with Gwen Cooper as our everyman.
Right. I went back and rewatched one of my favorite episodes because I hadn't seen it in a while from the first season. Of course, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's basically this airplane from the 1950s accidentally goes through this time portal. And so you've got all these characters from the 50s, and the whole show, the whole episode is about how they deal with life in the modern times. And some of them can't hack it and some of them can. And it was just, I was showing it to my wife because it was a good example of a science fiction show where you didn't have to have a villain. You didn't have to have a monster, yet it was still a compelling story from beginning to end, you know? So 2 quick things I wanted to mention that just occurred to me, and they're not my notes. I don't want to get too far into Doctor Who, but there is some brand new Doctor Who news that's come out this past week. David Tennant's returning. He's going to be the 14th Doctor. And also, oh my God, I just sent it to you guys. The name slips me. The guy's going to play the Master, the guy that played Superman in Man of Steel.
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill, yeah.
Is going to be the Master. And the picture that on that article that you sent is him with the beard, and he just looks like the Master to me in that picture. And I'm very, very excited for that. Doctor Who, it's the series 1 through 4 of Doctor Who and Torchwood series 1 through 4 were run by Russell T Davies, both of them concurrently, which is why they're actually written so tightly together, because they had the same guy at the helm the entire time. They didn't have to coordinate with all kinds of other writers and stuff. One person oversaw everything, was able to keep things relatively intact. And that showrunner, Russell T Davies, is going to be coming back for the upcoming Doctor Who era.
Right. So anyways, getting back to Torchwood, one other Doctor Who connection I wanted to mention, because it kind of figures prominently into this story, is a group called UNIT, and that stands for the Unified Intelligence Task Force, which used to be called the United Nations Intelligence Task Force. And they've got not a huge part in the story, but they do play a part. And UNIT, basically what they are is they're sort of a military outfit that's accountable to the government, the UN, and ultimately to the people, whereas Torchwood is answerable only to the Queen. And at the time it was the Queen, now it's the King. And kings and queens aren't elected figures, so that means Torchwood could get away with quite a bit. UNIT was often in Doctor Who, particularly with the 3rd and 4th Doctors way back in the 70s. Now, Spence, I know obviously you've watched all of the Doctor Who and Torchwood, and so my question to you is: was this your first time viewing of Torchwood: Children of Earth, and what was your first impression of it?
Honestly, I can't remember. I know I watched some Torchwood, like back when it first came out, but I honestly couldn't. If I did watch 3rd season or part of 3rd season before, I didn't remember it at all. So it seemed to me, this whole season, the whole 5 episodes seemed new to me. Even though I did watch the first few seasons of the new incarnations of Doctor Who, so I did know who Jack Harkness was. Even the thing that Spencer talked about, I saw it at the time, but I just completely forgot. Like, wait, what happened again? How did he what? But I knew him, and I knew I liked the character, and I must have watched at least Torchwood season 1 because I knew who Gwen was and I had a general idea. But my general impression, I thought the concept was very interesting. I kind of feel like I not to be critical, but Roger, I feel like you kind of oversold it a little bit. Like you kept saying, like, this is the best 5 episodes of television in the history of the world. Not quite that, but
pretty close.
So I think I went in with like, I don't know what, but like I think I was like, okay, this is going to be phenomenal. There were things I really liked about it, and there were other things that I was kind of like, meh. So I kind of ended up in the middle, I guess. I don't know how much are we spoiling, or are we?
Well, I was going to get to that. Yeah, we're going to warn the viewers, those of you watching at home, we are going to be spoiling this from beginning to end. So if you haven't seen Torchwood Children of Earth and you want to, we recommend that maybe you go and watch it and watch this discussion on the replay, or you may get to a point halfway through where you're like, all right, I'm sold, I want to go see this now, and then you can come back and finish our show later. So
I was going to say my favorite thing was how Captain Jack was killed and came back a couple of times, especially, I don't know, it was the second time or third time it happened to him. It was quite involved and gruesome and fascinating, and I thought that was really well done.
Yeah,
that was like my favorite part, I think.
I definitely agree. Torchwood Children of Earth was actually a big departure for Torchwood, because season 1 and 2 of Torchwood basically had kind of a regular TV show where some episodes were episodic and they had these like loose plot threads running through, and you got to the end and it kind of paid off for some of that. Season 1 had a bit of growing pains. Season 2 was a lot more fleshed out and really worked. Season 3, this Children of Earth, is like you said, 5 episodes, one story beginning to end, even as like the title card is Torchwood Children of Earth. So it's very, very different from what we see before in terms of Torchwood. So I really like what they've done with it and how they approached it. And it's not above criticism. I'm not gonna claim it is, but it is. I do think it overall it executed what it wanted very well comparatively to other things I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this, excuse me, all 5 episodes were directed by a man named Euros Lyn, who also worked on Doctor Who, Sherlock, Black Mirror, and Daredevil as well for Netflix.
No shit. Wow.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that. And then it was written by, all right, this is interesting. So the writing on this, the first, third, and fifth episodes of these 5 episodes were written by Russell Davies that Spence mentioned. And he also came up with the whole premise. Obviously, as Spence just said, he did a lot of Doctor Who episodes and produced this, several seasons. The 3rd episode was co-written by James Moran, and the 2nd and 4th were penned by what they refer to as a newcomer named John Fay. I mean, I guess he's no longer a newcomer now because this show. Spence, when did this first come out? Was it 2006 or 8?
Let me be specific here. It was 2009.
2009. Okay.
When Children of Earth came out.
I can't believe that. So I've got some pictures here and we'll go through the cast. Let me get to let me just close this out. Oops. And I'll share pictures. I got some pictures here.
I got pictures. The papers.
So we'll start with this one and I'll do my share screen. Oh, where did it go? There it is. All right. So share screen and share that. Boom. There we go. And that is our gang there. There's Yanto Jones here. We'll go into them in detail. Captain Jack Harkness that we've talked about, and Gwen Cooper. And I have to move us out of the way here so I can scroll to the next one. And there he is, John Barrowman as Captain Jack Harkness. Folks at home, you may also recognize him from the DC CW shows because he played Malcolm Merlyn, also known as the Dark Archer, on The Flash, Arrow, and Legends of Tomorrow. So I don't know if
I remember being a little kid seeing I'm like, hey, that's Captain Jack, and you're like, well, not quite, but yeah.
And there he is again. He returns.
That's a hard moment.
Yeah.
This moment specifically, his face there it looks a little silly in a freeze frame, but that specific moment is from episode 3, I believe, and it is a very emotional moment. It's
when he gets his coat. Ianto gives after he regenerates his whole body, and we'll talk about that.
Is that not when he walks in?
It's when he walks in with the coat on, but it was a full shot. I cropped it so you could just see him. Actually, I'm sorry. The camera pans up.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, there's Eve Miles as Gwen Cooper. And where's my notes? She's actually currently in a Showtime series called We Hunt Together, which is some kind of a crime drama, and another show called Keeping the Faith. She was in several. Apparently, she's in super demand. And I'll get into a little bit later why there was no season 5. There was a season 4 after this. And part of the reason was her schedule, because she's after Children of Earth, her career skyrocketed in England, and she's been in hot demand. And then, of course, we've got Gareth David Lloyd, who plays Ianto Jones. He's another one. He's been in a bunch of British shows mainly, and he's done work on a video game called Dragon Age. Have you heard of that, Spence?
Yep. Dragon Age is a pretty big RPG franchise.
Okay. So did you happen to recognize his voice in it at all, or?
No, I only knew Gareth David Lloyd from Torchwood. I am not a consumer of Dragon Age. I have heard of it. It's got its own dedicated fan base, but I am not part of that.
Okay. And then we've got what's his name?
Kai Owen.
Yeah. He's Gwen Cooper's husband, Reese, and he's really good in this. And it's funny because if you do go and watch the first couple seasons, she keeps it secret from him that she works for Torchwood. I think at least in the first season, right?
The entirety of the first season, and like 4 episodes into season 2, she keeps it from him. So that's another thing I really love about Children of Earth that I will praise it on, is having watched series 1 of Torchwood, series 2 of Torchwood, and then Children of Earth. It's very satisfying to see Reese, Gwen's husband, involved in all of this, and how much of a help he is. And it's actually a bit of a small subplot that people are shocked that he's actually so helpful, because Jack had always kind of seen him as a bit of a, if he was involved, he would bring the team down and not be very helpful. That's how Jack sees most people.
Yeah.
That's part of the show. That's because if you're not in his inner circle, he doesn't trust you. So it's a very, very good moment when we get Kai Owen's character, and there's a lot. They do a good job, I think, of not pushing his character too far, because he's there to support Gwen, but he also plays a great role in the team and ingratiates himself into the team very well.
Yeah, and especially in this, and we'll talk about it later, he has a key part in helping the plot line in Children of Earth. I can't speak. And then, of course, we've got the great Peter Capaldi as John Frobisher, who's he's just like this lackey that works for the government. And, of course, those who watch Doctor Who will recognize him as the 12th Doctor. And he was also, ironically, in the film World War Z, where he played a doctor for the organization called Who.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
And that was kind of prescient, because that was before he played Doctor Who. So, and then we've got Paul Copley, who plays Clement McDonald. He's really kind of a pivotal character in this, because he appears at the beginning as a child, and then we learn later on that he's actually got mental illness because of his experience from the scenes that happened at the beginning of the show. I almost said the film. And then, of course, Susan Brown plays Bridget Spears. She is Frobisher's assistant or secretary?
I believe so. I believe she is an assistant to Mr. Frobisher.
Yeah, and she really comes through.
I'm sorry, not Frobisher. I'm the Prime Minister.
No, she works for Frobisher.
Is she the one who works for Frobisher?
Yes.
Yep. I'm mixing people up now. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I didn't have a picture of that other chick, the one that really gives it to the prime minister at one point. And then we've got Lucy Cohu, who plays Jack Harkness's daughter. And I thought that was an interesting thing because she even says, I look older than you now.
Yeah. Torchwood is, as a series, as a whole show, intends itself to be more serious than Doctor Who. So because of that, I really appreciate that they lean into these things, like the reality of being immortal. Like, it sounds like a sweet deal until you try and have a family. And she even said, she's like, we all resented you because everybody grew older and you didn't. And
yeah.
it has real consequences.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, we've got Ian Gelder, who is Mr. Decker. He's sort of the Q of MI5. He's the head of MI5's technology division. And I guess he was there in the past, which we'll get into in 1965. Something happened then. And then we've got Kush Jumbo as Lois Habiba, who I love this character. And even the first time my wife and I watched it a couple of years ago, she kept saying Lois Habiba all the time. It's just so catchy. Then we've got Yanto's sister, Rhiannon, played by Katie Wicks. And she was really good in this too. I liked her. And she was a regular, quasi-regular character throughout the series, right? At least the first two?
So because of just the way Torchwood worked its way up, because in the season 1 and 2, instead of 3 people in the team, Yanto, Jack, and Gwen, it was Yanto, Jack, Gwen, and then they also had Owen Harper and Toshiko Sato. And because of that, Yanto kind of got the least amount of character development, as he was kind of seen as the, he was kind of seen as like the lackey to everybody else. So this character didn't show up until about midway of season 2, but it was really nice when you get to see her come back and play a much bigger role of helping humanize the conflict of Torchwood of Children of Earth.
Right. And then, of course, we've got Liz May Bryce, who plays Agent Johnson, no relation. And
Agent Johnson, Special Agent Johnson, no relation.
No relation.
For anyone missing the context here, it's a reference to Die Hard, because that was a running joke in the movie. Is you had 2 FBI agents and they were both named Johnson.
Yeah.
Same last name.
I don't have these actors' names here. He was the unit guy.
Sleepy Dude.
And these are the children. We'll get into why the children are standing there with their mouths open. And he's the prime minister. Say what?
Children's choir.
Christmas
carols.
This guy was the prime minister, but I don't have any more pictures to show, so I'll stop the share for now. So we've got a couple of things I wanted to mention. There's a guy named Nicholas Briggs, and he was he played one of the cabinet people. I think he's the one, when they were talking to him, they kind of mentioned, oh, well, you don't have kids, so you can't, participate in this conversation. And he's basically been a voice actor for Doctor Who for quite a few years. He's done voices of the Daleks. He's done all kinds of, like, the Zygons, all kinds of alien voices throughout the last few years. And he was also in quite a few episodes of the Big Finish. Big Finish is a company. It's like sort of a series of officially licensed audio dramas that they did for Doctor Who. And this guy, I think he even does K9's voice and stuff like that. So he's finally got an on-screen role here. And then I wanted to mention the Doctor Who character Martha Jones, who's played by Freema Agyeman. She was mentioned in the first episode. I think Captain Jack wanted to contact her, but then it turned out she was going on her honeymoon. At the conclusion of Journey's End, she was supposed to reprise her role as Martha Jones, and actually Noel Clarke was supposed to come back as Mickey Smith. Those are the 2 characters that got married, but they couldn't do it because of scheduling issues. So Russell Davies basically explained that, she had been cast in Law and Order, and they were doing 13 episodes, whereas Torchwood was only going to do 5. So she went with Law and Order UK, I should say. And so that's why he created the character of Lois Habiba. He wanted her to be kind of a Martha figure, but had an added innocence who's sort of out of her league in what's going on, but she manages to, jump in and help out.
I kind of love that because for anyone who's not familiar, Doctor Who had one of the major characters in one of the series, Freema Agyeman's Martha Jones. Martha Jones showed up as a character in multiple episodes of season 2 of Torchwood. She was a key character in at least 2 or 3 episodes, and it was a very, very fun time for me because I wasn't expecting that. And I remember watching Torchwood very recently because I hadn't seen it since I was a little kid. And Freema Agyeman walks in, and Captain Jack is like, "Oh, this is Martha Jones." I'm like, "This what?" It took me a hot second to realize that this was a clear crossover from Doctor Who into Torchwood, whereas up until that point, we had only had Torchwood into Doctor Who, and it was very, very fun for me. And then when they mention her that, oh, she's on her honeymoon, we don't want to bother her, it's actually a good excuse as to why a key character, somebody who they established she is one of the military officers, the medical officers in unit. So she was a direct contact to Captain Jack, and they give a very quick one-off reason of why she doesn't show up. It's not a plot hole, it's a plot point, which I really like.
I always loved Martha Jones. Like I realized that in the new run of the Doctor Who series, like Rose Tyler was like the big focus in a lot of the seasons. But I don't know. I always loved Martha Jones. I thought she was I liked her character, and I also thought she was incredibly hot. So like every time she was on the show, I was like, oh yes. And they mentioned her in Torchwood, and I was like, oh, maybe she'll appear in like, toward the end, maybe she'll arrive, like episode 4, episode 5 and something, but no, never did.
I'm glad she didn't though, because it definitely didn't, it would have stolen the show a little bit, because I think it's smart that they mention it. This is one of Torchwood's strength, and I think Russell T Davies' strength is they do a great job of telling when it's time to tell. Very much that Neil Gaiman style of writing, where you have these little references kind of peckered in, where it shows that there are consequences to the things that have happened, but it doesn't punish the viewer for not knowing what has happened.
Right.
Once again, I think it's a very, very smart move, and it doesn't hurt the viewing experience, which is something that we're seeing in a lot of expanded medias now, especially companies with big IPs that are trying to summon up these movies that not everybody's going to go see, and then you try and have them be written tightly. Well, it starts to hurt. So I think Torchwood does a good job, especially series 3. You can watch Torchwood Children of Earth and not have seen anything else in the Doctor Who universe, and it's perfectly fine.
True.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into the episodes. I have a brief synopsis of each, and we'll go through them episode by episode. It took me like all day just to get these brief synopses, because some of them were like way too long, and some of them were way too short or not even correct. So I think I've got it down. So of course, as Spencer mentioned, this episode 1 is called Day 1. It picks up after the deaths of Owen and Tosh at the end of season 2. So all that's left of Torchwood is Ianto, Jack, and Gwen. So the episode opens up one night in Scotland, 1965, where there's a bus with 12 children that stops out in the middle of nowhere, and they all get out and walk towards this light that seems to get bigger as they draw closer. One kid hesitates, then he flees as the light covers a large area. 44 years later, in Cardiff, England, September 2009 at 8:40 a.m., Gwen Cooper's at an ATM and notices 2 children standing completely still and unresponsive. In fact, all the children across the UK have frozen. After a minute, the children start moving again as if nothing happened. Then we cut to Clem, who's this elderly psychiatric patient. We kind of mentioned him in the credits there. He's been institutionalized since he was found wandering as a child. He's also joining the chant. And he says, "They found me." And then we see MI5 Officer Decker telling the government minister Frobisher that they are aliens named the 456, which is the frequency that they transmitted on. So that's the name the humans gave him. And he had previously warned Frobisher about these aliens, that they might come back. Frobisher tells the prime minister, whose chief concern is hushing up a past mystery. So Gwen goes out to talk to Clem. And, of course, he was the child that escaped earlier at the beginning of the episode. He's also got this sort of a psychic ability, or it's more like a super smell sense, or maybe that's how he interprets his psychic ability. because he senses that she's pregnant and she didn't even know she was pregnant. But he also believes that the children he was with on the bus in 1965 were abducted by aliens, and now they're going to return to Earth. So once again, the children of the world all stop, this time chanting, "We are coming." And every country, every child on the planet does that, and they do it in English. And it's much more creepier when you watch it in the show than me describing it. But after visiting his daughter Alice and his grandson Stephen, Captain Jack is lured into a government trap by seemingly friendly young doctor named Rupesh. However, Rupesh shoots him, and then Agent Johnson, no relation, shoots Rupesh, but not before planting a bomb inside of Jack's body without him knowing, because he's dead because he got shot. Then he wakes up, she shoots him again, he dies again. Then they cut him open, put a with a laser that conveniently like cuts him open, stick the bomb in, and it conveniently, seals him up so there's no scar. And then of course Clem's kind of senses that the government agents are going to go after him, and he goes on the run. So that is basically what happens in episode 1. What do you guys have to say about it?
Mike?
Yeah, definitely all the kids stopping and chanting at the same time. It's okay. Let me go back. I watched the beginning scene. It took place in 1965. And I saw all the kids walking toward the light, and then there was a school bus, which is apparently how they got out there in the middle of nowhere. And the thought kept nagging me, like, who drove the bus? Like, how did they get out there? Like, and then I kind of forgot about it, but they do come back to that later. Which is kind of something that Spencer mentioned, is these writers don't allow threads to just disappear. They come back to it and they explain it. Going to the Captain Jack thing that I was saying before that I loved was the woman who worked for the intelligence agency or for the government or whatever. She knew that he was immortal. And so she came in and she's talking to people and getting ready to do what they're going to do to him. And then Captain Jack wakes up. Even though he got shot in the chest, he wakes up and he's like, and he like sits up, and she just looks over and shoots him again. And he goes back down the table. Like she knew he was going to do that at some point. So she didn't even blink. Yeah, the episode was creepy. Definitely having the kids all together saying things, and people are like trying to shake them, snap them out of it, and they just won't. Yeah. And I thought it definitely grabbed your attention and grabbed my attention and made me want to know like what's coming next, kind of thing.
Yeah. I agree that that it's very, very eye-catching, and it's also very, very, in a way, it starts the stakes very effectively for the movie, because for the 5 episodes, the 5 hours we're gonna sit through, it's a very good start, because it doesn't start with alien invasion or anything crazy. It starts with the kids act weird. Okay, whatever. Well, then Torchwood starts looking into it. That was strange, but okay, once is a fluke. And then it happens again. Twice is a coincidence. Now they really start looking into it, and then the kids start chanting things in unison, and it's very scary. And then eventually by the end of the episode, it's happening all over the world. It amps the stakes up, but none of the children are harmed by it. They make that a very clear thing, that the kids didn't even know that happened. So it's very, very scary when you watch it, because then the kids they did a good job with child actors. Child actors historically have been a nightmare to get to work proper, but a lot of these kids, because they just had to stand there with a blank expression on their face, it really works and sells this creepiness factor of like, if you imagine your the little kid that you have in your life, and suddenly they just stopped and were chanting things in unison with the rest of the children all around them in public, and nobody can do anything about it. Very, very scary. And so I like how they started it. I do like also that this episode also, like you said, creates the thread of the bus and the kids in 1965, but it also creates the thread of Torchwood is now being hunted by these mercenaries who are hired by the government tangentially. And so it's it adds a layer of mystery to what's going on with the kids, what's going on with Torchwood, and none of it feels out of place. It very much feels like there is some sort of connection there. We just don't know where yet. So episode 1 does a great job of setting up the horror, but they don't lean into anything too crazily yet. It very much is one of those like fishing lines. Here's the bait. Now we want you to bite on. And I really like that.
Yeah, and they do a great job of setting up all the characters in this episode without it being expository. That cut from, family to family. Even Captain Jack's grandson is frozen at the beginning, and you see his mother, but you don't quite know who he is at first. And then you see Yanto's sister and her kids, and even Frobisher's kids, which actually leads to kind of a funny moment later on in the episode where the two, I don't know if it was this one or the second one, but Frobisher's two daughters are sitting there at the breakfast table, and they're like, "We want a pony. We want a pony."
Yeah, they pretend that they're in a trance again.
Yeah.
Which is I think a very good thing to have, because it's actually probably how somebody would react. Like it's how a kid would see it. They wouldn't think of it as crazy. They would think of it as like, this could be funny. Yeah. And it does a good job of alleviating the tension, but that in and of itself creates more tension, because now we're like, wait, what if it happens again and we're not actually going to notice, or something like that.
Right.
Could be anything.
Yeah. And I definitely, because the first time, like, it's almost like the first time the kids just freeze, they don't say anything, so it's almost like the aliens were testing it out to see if they could do it. And then once they do it, the second time the kids start chanting, "We are coming, we are coming," but it's accompanied by this deep, echoey kind of voice as well. It's not just the kids' voices, it's also this alien voice, if you will. Which to me, that whole scene was so chilling. And that's the point I felt like and I think Michael, you just said this too. That's where you're riveted. You're like, okay, now I want to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And it's like all the kids were facing the same direction, and the people were trying to like talk to them and snap them out of it. And they were just like, and I agree with what Spencer said about the child actors. I mean, there were a couple that were kind of bland, but a lot of them, I was like, wow, they really look like they're possessed or like just having an out of body experience. I mean, even though all they had was one line and they just had to stand there and repeat it, but some of them were pretty expressive in the face, and I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of what sells it also is you see a lot of parents with their little kids of like, they're panicked, absolutely utterly panicked, and then when the kids snap out of it, it immediately makes it even creepier because there's no acknowledgement of it. It's a very, very interesting line where the absence of certain acknowledgements within the script actually heightens the tension for us as the audience, because we're all like, wait, the kids don't even know this happened.
Yeah.
Okay. It throws us off in a way that doesn't deter us from wanting to know more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's even more part of the reason why Frobisher's kids did it as a joke, because they don't remember doing it. Yeah. Everyone's telling them, all the kids stopped and talked at the same time and chanted, and they're like, what? We don't remember doing that. So then when they did it as a joke, it was probably just like, oh, this is weird thing, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. As part of the part of the plot, they have all videos of it, and then that's how they find Clement. Also, is that everybody's like, right, okay, all the kids have stopped and are chanting, and this one
adult,
and that's when everything starts to be like, okay, now there's these pieces. There's got to be somewhere. At first, I thought it was like people who were mentally ill, so it was almost like taking advantage of children and things like that. But it wasn't. They established it's just this one guy. Now it becomes even more confusing, and it also sets a good focus on the kids. That it's a good plot thread, but it doesn't detract from the overall creepiness of it either.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that the whole. Just the whole setup, I just loved. I loved how they did it. So let's get into episode 2, day 2. And the synopsis is after the Torchwood. All right. So let's back up a little bit because Clem smelled that Gwen was pregnant. She goes to the Torchwood hub and starts scanning herself. And Jack walks into the room, and he, for whatever reason, he touches her hand because he's, happy that she's pregnant or whatever. But then the scanner scans him, and that's when they realize he's got a bomb implanted in his torso. So he gets everybody out, but he stands there in the Torchwood hub, and it's hidden. It's this underground, as Gwen referred to it, as this underground sci-fi bunker, basically, and it just obliterates the whole place.
Yeah, the bomb destroys the whole thing.
Yeah.
The ending of episode 1 is huge because of that fact, because we have this plot of Torchwood being attacked. Jack blows up. It blows up the Torchwood hub. kind of a bit of a blow, honestly. Really, really sad because we all love that for the first 2 seasons, and it sets the stakes really high for our characters, but it doesn't set the stake high for the entire show just yet. On top of that, they have that plot thread of Jack's about to blow up, and the rest of the audience who kind of has seen Torchwood is like, yeah, this isn't going to stop him. Oh, it took the hub too. Okay, so it's a bit of, there is a loss there. And the other big cliffhanger is the fact that the children have been saying, we are coming, and at the very end of the episode, we are coming back, and the episode ends. I was pissed.
Yeah. Yeah, like dropping little breadcrumbs for the audience, and then be like, "What?"
Right.
I had to keep watching.
Yeah.
And I like that Jack was. I mean, he kind of had little choice, but he was basically like, "I'm going to stay here. You guys get the hell out." Like it's easier for you guys to run and me to stay, especially since it's kind of underground and sort of like shielded from the surrounding area to some degree, rather than have him run out into the open and blow up on the street and kill a bunch of random people or whatever. And one of the guys, I think the other guy in the group said, like, are you sure you can survive this? And he was like, I guess so,
Right.
Yeah.
I hope so, but get the hell out of here, And
yes, that is also a good point, that they don't shy away from using the Torchwood hub for this last moment, because they established earlier in the series that Torchwood hub is huge. Like, it has this like lobby area that we all see, that's like kind of the big iconic thing, but it has these like layers and layers and layers of holding cells. So he goes to the bottom of that area and is like, I really hope this works and doesn't kill anybody else. It's scary. Even it's scary for basically you're worried that it's gonna kill our other characters, and not, I'm worried that Yanto and Gwen are gonna kick the bucket, not Jack. I'm not actually worried about it.
I also like the fact that Jack's not 100% sure what it's going to do to him, because it's not like Superman where he's like, I'll be fine.
Right.
He's kind of like, I think I'll survive. I've survived everything else. Like, I've never had a bomb inside me before, but
I remember very vividly, there's a quick Superman cartoon where he has to basically, instead of diffusing this bomb, is this tiny little micro bomb, what he does is he just cups his hands around it, and the dude it's attached to, he's like, waiting is the hardest part. It's absolutely concerning, because you're like, you're not sure if it's actually going to work or not. That it is that same feeling of like, well, this could be really bad for me, but you know what? We'll have to see. There's not much of a choice.
Yeah.
I think up to this point, we've never seen Jack blown up. So
yeah. That's also a good point, is that they don't, the show tests his limits in a very plausible way. I really like how Children of Earth treats his immortality, and how Children of Earth is really the big payoff to his immortality, because Miracle Day tried to turn that on its head. So Children of Earth is really when we have Jack keeps waking up, getting shot, waking up, getting blown up. So it's very, very good how they do that. And it like I said, it ups the stakes, but it doesn't shoot them so high that the show can't keep up.
Right.
And it keeps enough of a question mark so that you want to watch. That's another reason why you want to see the next episode. Like, what happened to him? Like, does he lose an arm? Does he survive but lose an arm? Does he, like, what's, what state is he in after that?
Exactly. And I'm glad that part of Children of Earth as a whole is they don't shy away from the other types of horror that they can inject into it, from the body horror of Jack regenerating.
Yeah.
Right. And I just want to remind folks at home too that we're live here on Facebook at facebook.com/Fright Lounge, and we're also live on YouTube at youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1. So if you want to chime in, please feel free to write something in the comments section below, and we'll mention it on the air. So let's get into day 2 here. The synopsis is, after the Torchwood hub is destroyed, Gwen escapes and goes on the run with husband Reese, with an army detachment under tough female Agent Johnson in pursuit. No relation. Decker gives Frobisher cryptic written plans for a mysterious edifice the 456 want built, though not even the Prime Minister knows what it is. Lois, Frobisher's new temp, accidentally finds secret information on Torchwood in her computer and is curious, but Frobisher tells her that Jack was the terrorist who caused the explosion. Gwen and Reese hide in a potato truck bound for London, where she discloses that she's pregnant. She's keen to get an explanation also from Frobisher, unaware that he's trying to have her killed. And the rest of Torchwood. Yanto escapes separately, seeking help from his sister, whom he meets in a park where children freeze again, chanting, "We are coming tomorrow." Meanwhile, Clem is on the streets, and he's also doing the chant. Lois is now mistrustful of her boss, and she gets a phone call from Gwen and meets with her and Reese secretly to basically tip them off that they're in danger. They infiltrate a warehouse, saving Jack, whose body has regenerated, and are in turn rescued by Yanto. Frobisher and Decker, having obeyed instructions, await the aliens. So there's a lot to unpack here in this episode. You know, I don't know where you guys want to start. I mean, I guess we'll start with Decker giving the instructions to Frobisher of what the aliens want. Spence, you want to describe what it is?
It's essentially a massive, like a massive fish tank to create a unique atmosphere in. Is essentially what it is. You're not very clear what it's going to be, and they actually do a very good job being secretive about it. But yeah, it's basically this big tank that they end up filling with a certain chemical mixture to have one of the alien representatives comes down. And part of the plot, a very small detail, is that this is all happening in London. Peter Capaldi's character talking with the Prime Minister. This is all happening in London, and Cardiff is in Wales. So they have to, hitch a ride on the truck, and Gwen and Reese have to get up there, and Yanto has to get up there as well. So it's very, very small detail, but it's very, very fun to pull the cast out of the place that they're so comfortable in. Because I won't lie, I'm actually starting to, through the first two series, I familiarized myself a little bit with some of the locales in Wales, and specifically Cardiff, because of just it kept showing shots of these like same buildings and these same landmarks. I'm like, oh, I kind of have an idea of where they are. And now that they're ripping us out of that, we're going over to London, which is famous, but I'm not directly familiar with it and where they're going to be going and all that stuff. I also just really enjoy this is the episode where they get rescued by Yanto, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, this is really this episode 2 is the big payoff for seeing what Jack's immortality really means, because they have they find all the body parts they can in a body bag, and they put it in a cell, and they're just like, whatever, and then it slowly starts to move a little bit, and we're all like almost gagging on the inside of like, oh my god, he's still alive in there. And I think they do a good job of then eventually they show him with he's muscles growing back, his skin hasn't started growing back yet, and he's screaming in immense pain. It's just very, very disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, they pretty much just found an arm and his head, most of his head, and he grew back from that, which is insane.
I like how the top female agent there, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name.
Johnson.
Oh, of course, Johnson.
No relation.
She goes in there with one of the other soldier guys, and they unzip the body bag at one point, and he's like, "Oh yeah, look at that. There's hardly anything left." And she goes, "That's more than was there before."
His skeleton is growing back.
Skeleton, spine is growing back, and everything. And the guy's like, "What? Really?" Yeah. And then as his body is being rebuilt, he experiences, like you said, the screaming and the pain that as his body's putting itself back together, it's almost as painful as when it was torn apart, except slower.
Yeah.
Which is something they address in previous bouts of Torchwood is Jack's like, when I die, I feel it. It's never painless. So I like that they lean into that it's really rough. And it doesn't distract, but this one is really when the kids are all like, oh, we're coming tomorrow. So it sets the tone, but because there's minimal development with the kids and there's not a lot of change, because in episode 1 we kind of had some change. They stopped, then they stopped and said something, then they stopped and said something again, something new. So now they're just saying one sentence that's new comparatively, but it wouldn't enthrall the viewer that much. So they have it, they come back to it, it's a key point. But the stakes are all about the fact that our characters now have to get to London and try and solve this problem, because they also feel they're the most qualified to deal with this problem. Torchwood is built on, stopping alien threats, and the Prime Minister is not built for that. So it's very, very, they almost feel cheated in a way. which I really enjoy that. And this is the same episode where once Jack's body is regrown, he's in the cell. They cuff him. He's cuffed, and he has no clothes, and he can't. They fill his cell with cement, which was incredibly horrifying. I remember that as a little kid, seeing that. I only remember bits and pieces. I didn't remember the full thing, but I remembered that.
Yeah.
And that was really, really, really like scary for me, because I hate the concept of being buried alive.
Yeah.
So that was very, very rough. But Jack really took it like a trooper. He's like, I don't care. I think after you get blown up and knit back together and you go through all that, you're like, whatever.
Well, he wasn't happy when the cement started pouring down on him, but when he finally was able to come out of it, he was sort of like, oh shit, like that point he was kind of like just another like obstacle to get past.
All right, check that one off the list.
And that was pretty smart on Agent Johnson's part to do that, because she's like, I'm not going to tell you anything because you can't die. You're going to know it. You're going to remember it. The information's never going to go anywhere. So she can't contain him. The only way to contain him was to fill his cell up with cement. And I wanted to take a quick step back here, Spence, just to clarify what you had said earlier when you described what the aliens are having the humans build for them. It's a tank, and you mentioned they fill it with chemicals, but I wanted to put the point out, the chemicals are gas. They're not it's not liquid. It's not like a fish. I mean, it's kind of like a fish tank, but except instead of liquid inside, it's poisonous gas.
Right.
Yes.
That's poisonous.
But and some other shit.
So I love the fact too that Reese and Gwen disguised themselves, because the doctor that shot him and then he got shot by Johnson is also in that facility in another cell, his dead body. And so Gwen and Reese pretend to be funeral people going to claim the body. And then they knock the guard out and they get the keys and they try to find Jack, and they open up the cell door and it's just this big concrete slab in front of them. And they're like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah. It very much, that was, I think, a good choice on their part, because it actually showed us what it means for Jack to be locked in cement. It's like, okay, you fill it with liquid cement, sure, but then you see the dried cement, and we know Jack's in there. It definitely adds to that, like, that horror, and it ups the stakes for the moment. But it doesn't break anything. It just is a great way to show and not tell. It's not like, oh, Jack's locked in concrete. Like, it doesn't really mean much. But when you're like, knock, knock, he's not here. So it's a lot scarier. I think that was a really good point.
Wasn't there a point? Oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you finish your thought. I'll go on.
I was just going to say, I don't know if I zoned out or if they just I don't think they really spelled out bit by bit what they were going to do. So when the other dude who's on the team,
Yanto,
when Yanto smashed in the side of the building with the forklift thing and pulled the whole concrete thing out, I sort of didn't see that coming at all. And I was like, oh, dude, like, that's awesome, like, so
yeah. I remember cheering. Cheering.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, cheering. Yeah. And then I was like, well, now what's he going to do with it? And then they little by little, they showed you where he was headed. And I was like, oh, like, yeah.
And it was perfect timing, because the soldiers had cornered Gwen and Reese. She had to put her gun down on the floor because she knew they were outgunned. And then the chaos of him ripping the cement block out of the building was enough for them to be able to escape. And then they all jump on the forklift, riding it till he dumps it into the quarry, and it breaks into all kinds of pieces, freeing Jack. And then Gwen goes further to, I think she shoots the forklift, or she pulls it in the way, because now the soldiers are pursuing in vehicles. She blocks the way and lights the forklift on fire, or she explodes it or something by shooting it. And so they have enough time to be able to get away, which I thought was great. I mean, that whole sequence was fantastic.
Yeah.
I definitely remember cheering when the big crash happens. Oh my God. And you see Yanto pulling the cement block out. I was like, yeah. Because it very much was also a payoff to us not being told where Yanto was. Like you said, Mike, they weren't spelling it out. We didn't get to follow Yanto's story. And I think that was an excellent point, where a big thing for me in media is show and tell, of when do you show, when do you tell. This was a great moment where they didn't tell, thus they only needed to show.
Yeah.
Because they established there was a construction site already in place. That was something Gwen and Reese had passed.
Yeah.
So when the forklift just comes in with the massive cement block, you're just like, I don't care. It's awesome. It
Yeah.
worked. And
Yeah.
it satisfies where this character was, because I was starting to think, I'm like, oh, I wonder what Yanto's doing. Is he still like stuck in Cardiff? Like, nope,
Yeah.
he was there.
Yeah.
I thought there was a shot prior to that where he's like standing on a hill and he sees the giant truck and they've got the hose coming from the cement mixer to the roof, pouring it into the thing, and that's how he knew it was there.
Yeah, I just didn't realize that he would have a plan to actually combat that, not just like, oh, infiltrate and try and get him out. It was like he was like, we're gonna have to desperate measures.
And it's pretty quick drying cement there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. Oh yeah, that's true. I guess they were, unless they were filling parts of the building structure anyway, and they had filled Jack a couple hours earlier, and they were just at that moment that he saw the thing. Maybe they were filling another part.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, you're right. It wouldn't have gone from liquid to. Yeah.
What I would love to know is what happens to Jack. He's got cement basically his whole. It's right on his face. There is no room to breathe, or not even like a little pocket, because he couldn't. His hands were chained up. So what happens to him in that? We'll never know. But I would love to think. I love to think about stuff like that. So,
yeah, it must have gone up his nose and in his ears, and every place it could go, and his eye sockets and stuff. And then, because I thought it was actually going to take him a little longer to emerge from it once the block fell and cracked open. I thought, it's going to take him a minute to like. But I think for dramatic purposes, they were just like, screw it. It's broken. He stands up. He's like, woof, and then let's go.
Yeah.
I didn't really think too hard about that. And I think that was kind of the point, was that, okay, great. They escaped and he got out. I mean, from an in-universe perspective, you could almost argue, like, if he encounters like any kind of like serious foreign object, like that's invading his body as a threat, it has some sort of defense system of like do something, but they don't really go into it, and I'm glad they don't.
Yeah. Or like he had his arms chained up, so he might have gone like this or something.
Yeah. Could have been anything. And the real question is, how conscious was he? If he stops breathing, sure, maybe he loses consciousness. That's good enough. But if he was awake for the whole thing, that's horrifying.
Right. And Spence, wasn't there something that happened to him? I can't remember if it was in one of the first two seasons of Torchwood or Doctor Who, where he ended up being buried alive in a coffin, and for like 100 years.
He was buried alive underneath Cardiff for a couple thousand years. Yeah, it was like 500 BC, and they found him in like the 1800s. So give or take 2,000 years. And yeah, that was part of the plot point of series 2, was that he was buried alive there. But that was one of those things where when they show him, he's covered in dirt, and I very much enjoy that. But they don't establish it, but I like to think that he just kind of lost consciousness and just didn't really live through it. Or if he did, there was just no air, died so quickly every time that it just becomes mundane. Like you said, they actually make it a good point that he doesn't recognize Agent Johnson, because even though she's the one that shot him when he woke up, it's such a sudden thing that be brought back to life immediately, that even if she's the one that guns you down, he doesn't get his bearings for those first 5 seconds of him being awake. So that also is how you would explain him keeping his sanity.
I was gonna say that. Yeah.
That's how I like to see, is that he actually doesn't register most of it, thus he's able to stay the same person. It doesn't feel like time actually passed.
Yeah.
Which is
because otherwise, if he was buried for that long, aware but unable to get out, he'd lose his mind. Plus, feeling the pain every time he dies, he feels it and then comes back. So that's like trauma that's adding up over time. I mean, he would probably be kind of insane by this point, Yeah.
And so they don't really get into it too far, which I think is smart. But there's a reasonable understanding that essentially every time he's like smothered like that in the cement block, he can't really, die from it. So once again, I would like to praise Children of Earth for this variety of horror, because you have this internal body horror of Jack's existence, that he's inside a cement block. It would kill anybody, but it doesn't kill him. And they they kind of gloss over it at that point, but it is still kind of scary. And then of course blowing him up was also something very, very hard to watch. It's really kind of gross. I thought the practical effects for him being so grotesquely mangled as he's
Yeah.
reverse being destroyed.
I was a little surprised that it was as graphic as it was. Like, it was pretty gross. Like, they showed his like skeleton kind of bloody, like starting to rebuild the tissue on top of the skeleton. I was like, oh God. And then once he was halfway there, he was still, like you said, his skin was all like burned and nasty, and he was in agony. And I was like, oh God. Like,
yeah, it was very good. I'm glad they didn't focus on it, because it doesn't shift the series, but it allows that moment for the audience to shiver from, like, okay, that is horrifying.
Yeah.
And then we were able to move on from that. They escape into the
Yeah.
Welsh quarry, which is very funny for me, because I watch this channel on YouTube, and this dude reviews Doctor Who episodes, and every time there are rocks or anything, if they're on like Mars or something, he jokingly says, which is actually just a Welsh quarry, but like, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's very funny that, like, it is a Welsh quarry.
Actually, yeah. I love that after Jack gets out of the concrete and they drive down to like pick him up, Gwen, he's naked because he was naked inside the thing, his dead body, and then she gives him his long coat to like cover himself up, and he just throws it over his shoulder and keeps walking like naked, like you can still like, he doesn't care.
I've heard that about John Barrowman too, that sometimes on radio interviews he's been known to just sort of whip his junk out for no reason.
Really?
Yeah.
I have heard stories like that where
He must
John
be proud of
Barrowman
it.
is very
Endowed.
much like Captain Jack,
Well,
in the sense of apparently this is something a friend of mine told
bisexual.
Me, not just that, a friend of mine told me that her ex-boyfriend or something had met John Barrowman in person, and because at the time they were minors, he was like, call me when you're legal, and like kind of moved on from that. And so he like almost like he really was Captain Jack.
Bit of a flirt.
I would love to meet the man, just say hi.
He's very cool.
Yeah.
So I think also his acting in Children of Earth is very well done as well. And as we said, for the grotesque parts, his screams really do embody that, like, I'm in utter agony. It's actually unimaginable.
Yeah. And one of the synopsis I was looking up said that when he had no skin, his eyes hadn't even formed back yet, and that's when he was just screaming bloody murder and agonizing pain.
It was rough. I'm just glad they waited until he had skin to cement him.
Yeah.
Right. I know, right?
Like,
seriously.
Think about it. I mean, imagine they were like, oh, he's just bones right now. Now's a great time. And like, he can't form back.
Oh God.
That would be probably terrible.
I almost think that the Agent Johnson there wanted to know what his limitations were, and was he going to completely come back and have his memories,
Yeah.
That is something I've seen in, like, when it comes to immortal characters, like with Wolverine. You can't kill Wolverine, but you can destroy his brain, and thus the memories, which are just neural pathways, grow back as blank slates and not as the memories.
Right.
They don't really address that here, but I've seen that, and so I like that it is established that, yes, of course, he keeps remembering even if you destroy the brain.
Yeah.
Very, very helpful.
So moving on to the third episode, which is aptly titled Day 3. The team hide out in a former Torchwood facility known as Torchwood 1, stealing things to survive. Gwen meets with Lois, giving her a laptop and special contact lenses with micro cameras in them that'll allow Torchwood to monitor what's going on in the government building. Gwen also has Clem, who was arrested for causing a public disturbance, released and brings him to their hideout. Agent Johnson, no relation, locates and captures Alice and her son Stephen, Captain Jack's daughter and grandson, after Alice has tried calling Jack. Soon after, children all around the world start to chant, "We are here," and a pillar of fire casts down onto the MI5 building. The alien leader communicates with Frobisher, and they're watched by the Torchwood team thanks to Lois. Everything's bound up with the events of 1965 as the alien voice tells Frobisher, and Jack also comes to realize the connection. The aliens explain their demands. They want 10% of the world's children to go with them, whilst Clem recalls Jack as the one who, from the beginning in 1965, allowed the aliens to abduct the children in Scotland, a fact that Jack cannot deny. And here we are at yet another supremely chilling moment when the aliens basically say, we want 10% of the children.
Yeah.
I remember being quite a little kid, and when that line was said, I was like, 10%, that's not a lot. And I just couldn't fathom what it actually meant.
Yeah. And then they actually started talking about what the numbers were in the show. And then you're like, oh shit, that's a lot.
Right. Yeah. And I don't remember if I think it was this episode too, the children start chanting numbers and the adults figure out that each country that the children were in, that was the 10%, that number was 10% of the children population in those countries.
Yeah. As a really good point, I'm glad they didn't shy away from having children in other countries speaking different languages. And Russell T Davies, notably throughout Doctor Who and Torchwood, does a really good job of using TV and news as a way to tell us things about the rest of the world, which I really enjoy. So this moment of you get newscasters being like, oh, children are chanting numbers. Apparently it's different in different countries. We're getting reports from India. We're getting reports from China. We're getting reports from the US and all this stuff. And I really liked that aspect of this episode, that they were able to kind of give it this global scale. And then it started to change of no longer are the children the source of the creepiness. They're now the victims of it too. They're going to be the real victims of it, and terrifying for everyone involved.
Right. And for me, what was even more chilling than the aliens basically demanding 10% of the children was when the politicians don't even consider fighting back. They just start to figure out, well, how many can we give and which ones should we give? And, it's that to me was the scariest part of this whole episode.
Well, the 4, 5, 6 basically say, we want 10% of the children, and the people of Earth are like, what if we say no, or what,
yeah,
or somebody said it directly to them, or what, but they basically at some point they say, we'll wipe out your whole civilization, we'll just kill everybody on the planet.
That is a key point that they kind of start with here in episode 3 that gets paid off later through 4 and 5, is the 4, 5, 6 are very, very advanced in biowarfare and biotechnology. They have diseases that can wipe the human race out, and they don't care. So it's so very much is they have to as horrible as it is, the politicians have to consider the real options here of, is the human race's survival actually at risk? If we say no, will we die? And they don't. I do agree that they don't really test it, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they don't test it, and they are very, very much like, can we really do this? Are we sure about this? Is this really a good idea? And I think Peter Capaldi does a great job of being this terrified bureaucrat who hasn't really had to talk to people, talk to anybody face to face that wasn't within his circle that he had to kind of work with. And he was very, very interesting representative for, as far as we could tell, humanity. And all that, and I really love that. Also with Gwen having as a side note, Gwen having the contact lenses, that is from the contact lenses with the little cameras that link to the laptop. That's from series 2 of Torchwood. They already established that previously, so it very much was a payoff for me. I'm like, ooh, a little bit of continuity here. Even though Torchwood Hub is gone, we still have some things that we've seen before that are relevant to the situation, and also it makes narrative sense. It doesn't feel cheap or forced, or like, oh, look at this one thing that just so happened to survive. Gwen's like, no, I never walk around without these.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I really like that, because they kind of loosely leave it in series 2 of Gwen kind of has them sometimes, and they're really, really fickle about who uses alien technology. But that was a good one. I'm glad that showed up again.
Wasn't there sort of an in-joke where it was like her and her husband would use them when they would get intimate or something?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. There was a quick joke of they've got a lot of uses.
Yeah.
Yeah. They sort of alluded to that, but didn't get too detailed.
One thing I wanted to mention too. Oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead. I always cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I really like the scene where Gwen was trying to convince Lois to wear the lenses and go in to the place and do the spying. because it wasn't like this predictable, like in some shows that people are like, well, I don't know. And the other person says, this is really important. And the person goes, okay. But like in this one, Lois kept saying, I can't, you're putting me in this position. And then they sort of like debated back and forth about like how important it was and whatever. And she was like, I can't. She, was like considering what Gwen was saying, but at the same time, still saying no. And it was one of the many awesome dilemmas that they have in this season, and Gwen like just puts them in her hand and says, decide later, but here,
Yeah.
And then at Torchwood, they don't know if it's going to work until they get the camera feed coming through on the laptop, and they're like, oh yes, she did it. But yeah, I liked it that it was realistic that Lois would be resistant to it,
Right, because she literally just started the job 2 days prior.
Yeah,
she could go to prison for treason for the rest of her life, or whatever. If that,
it's very funny.
One thing they set up prior to this too, I think it was in episode 2, was where her boss there, Bridget Spears, gives her username and password to get into the computer because they're so insanely busy now. She's like, here, just take it. She writes it on a Post-it note in case you need it. Because I might be out of the room or whatever, and you might need to access something. So she gets the call from Captain Jack, who's trying to get in touch with Frobisher, and of course, Frobisher's not going to take the call. He put out the hit on, and this is something we probably should have mentioned. There were so many details. That's why it was hard to put these synopses together, because I didn't want to overdo it with the details, and I knew we'd remember them as we went along. He goes to the Prime Minister about this, and they talk about something we still don't know quite exactly what happened in 1965, except for the fact that the 456 had been connected to that somehow. And the Prime Minister washes his hands completely. He's like, I'm not doing the blank page, what's called the blank page. He's like, you never even told me that you were going to use the blank page. And so Frobisher basically hands Bridget a file with a blank piece of paper in it, and that's a kill order. And Lois finds the email from Spears basically saying Captain Jack and 3 other military personnel are targeted for termination. And so that's sort of kicking around in the back of Lois's mind when she's debating whether or not to use the contact lenses. She's like, these people just ordered the murder of 3 people for no reason, at least in her mind, for no reason, But one thing I wanted to bring up too, there were 2 cool things, which was the fact that the contact lenses can only see and have limited lip reading software. They can't hear. I liked that it had that limitation. But Gwen could type things, and Lois Habiba would see them in her eyes,
Yeah.
That was really, really neat. Something they had kept and carried over, and it feels like a very, very valid limitation for the story. It's not that they're suddenly somebody's caught on to them or anything like that. The characters are successful, but they're still limited in certain aspects. The technology can only do so much for them, and it very much feels like there isn't a there isn't a sonic screwdriver moment that happens a lot in Doctor Who of I can just wave my magic wand and it kind of goes away, or at least solves a lot of our problems. This is just one of our many tools, arguably our best tool, but it still would be nothing without us, and we still had to come up with the idea to use it. So it feels very narratively satisfying, and it doesn't feel cheap, doesn't feel forced throughout the entire thing. And I also just like the way these things connect, where Capaldi's character is hunting Jack. Jack and Gwen talk to Lois, who is the assistant to Bridget and Capaldi's character. So it's very much this circle of us trying to come to the center of what actually happened and what's going to happen as well, because they don't harp on this mystery too hard, but they do establish that it's a big deal. I think also episode 3 is when the unit personnel show up, or at least make their appearance much more important, or is that the next episode?
Oh, he was there for the beginning, for the very first episode.
Yes.
Which I'll mention something about that in a little bit, but I also wanted to say too that they were pretty lucky that Yanto could read shorthand, because she's writing all the notes in shorthand. They had to make her move over to the side because Frobisher's back is facing at one point. Well, maybe that's later on in the thing, but she had to move around so she could get their lips. But she's also writing her notes or writing what she knows they can't hear in shorthand. And luckily, Yanto Jones could read shorthand.
Yeah, exactly. That is it, and that was a good moment that also made Yanto feel important.
Yes.
It very much it helped that every character had their place. Jack's the leader. Gwen's right now she's the techie. Reese does a good job of covering for them socially with a lot of that stuff where he's like, hey, we have to do this thing, we have to do that thing so we don't look suspicious. And then you have Yanto, who now is one of the key. He's the translator of the group, and it's really, really important. And I do love that. I remember both episode 2 with Yanto showing up with the forklift and episode 3, I was starting to think a little. I'm like, hey, what's Yanto been doing? And then he just pipes up like, hey, I'm still here and I'm helpful. So it felt pretty good.
There was one funny moment too where my grandson would he would catch bits and pieces of it while I was rewatching it, and I didn't notice this till he said it. He goes, why do they have that kind of phone? What's up with their phones? It's so weird. And then I realized it was over 10 years ago, and phones have changed so drastically. But it didn't even register with me,
Yeah, they didn't have smartphones.
So that was kind of funny.
Very, very funny to think about that. It's especially things that happened in the 90s and the 2000s, very much products of a time gone by, which is weird.
And what's cool is on a different note here, Mike, you mentioned the opening sequence. If you go back and watch that sequence, because it's at this point, which I read in the synopsis, excuse me for one second. Captain Jack and the 2 or 3 other soldiers that were on the kill list were the ones that drove the kids to be given to the 456 back in 1965. And if you go back and rewatch that scene, you see him standing behind the children in front of the bus. But if you don't know and you're not looking for it, you don't notice it,
Yeah.
But now we know the story that these aliens came down. They were gonna give us a cure for like some kind of bird flu or something that would have killed millions and millions of people. And so in exchange for the cure, they wanted 12 children, which is interesting because what that makes me wonder, did their population grow ever since 1965? So now they need more. I mean, they don't really explain why they want the children just yet.
Yeah.
We can get into that later.
Yeah.
But Captain Jack, you could tell right in his face that he feels bad that he was part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very good point, especially because that moment is very structurally well done, because Clem's super smell essentially. He's, as Jack is off doing things because of they figure out, oh, it's these people that they're after because that the government is after. Jack's like, wait, I recognize those people, kind of runs off, starts to remember what these people were for. They then get Clem as part of their team. Clem starts to smell something, and he's like, I know that smell. That's the man that sent us to the aliens, 40 years ago. And that's just Jack's walking in. And John Barrowman's acting here is really, really good, because he's almost crying. Like, he's very, very just ashamed that he's like, I gave them 12 children in 1965. And that flashback does a great job of actually, in a way, it kind of tells, but it shows that gives precedent to the idea that the aliens do have control of biowarfare. They do have, they've released diseases on the earth before that have and will kill millions, and they've also released cures for these things.
Right.
A very, very smart point to make for us to think, okay, the threat is now credible for us as the audience.
Right.
Which makes it feel less bad when the politicians are like, well, you know what, they came, they asked nicely, and I think we should give it to them. It's like, no, there's a threat here.
Even though he feels bad, he was in an impossible situation back then too. It was kind of like, well, what, either 12 kids versus how many million people are going to die from the,
Right.
Yeah. I like that they don't, that there's a bit of a gripe within the team of like, I can't believe you've done this, but this is also a big moment for the team of like, this is Jack we're talking about. We never knew everything about him. So it's almost like they're not surprised, but they are upset about it. Although I'm glad it doesn't drive a whole rift through them because of that fact. I feel like that's something they could have leaned into as the team starts to fall apart, but the story wouldn't have worked so well if they did that. So I'm glad that they address it. Right. And Jack's like, I've also had 44 years to think about this. So what else would I have done?
And the thing that's horrifying too is that the government officials, when they're debating how many children or what children to give, they basically decide on giving the dumb and poor kids. They're like, well, nobody's going to miss that. It's like, what the fuck?
That was actually, that was something when Clem asked Jack, he's like, why did you give us? And, because they were a bunch of foster kids and in the government foster care system. And Jack was brutally honest with him. He's like, because nobody would miss you.
Right.
And it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
He says that. And like you said, when they're like, Bridget is, I think, is the character that does that steps up, and she gives a very realistic and pragmatic answer of, who do we give? We have to give the people that we care the least about.
Right.
And as awful as that is, it doesn't feel malicious. It doesn't villainize the politicians per se for considering this because of the credible threat. Now, for the audience, the threat is credible. Thus, the conversation doesn't feel plausible or it doesn't feel preachy at all. I very much enjoy that. I was like a little nervous when the government was like sitting down in their little meeting room and they're like, what do we do about this? It didn't feel like it's like all government officials, because there's a really big back and forth of everybody being, and most people are too scared to talk. Is also very much, I love that stuff. I love the political thrillers where you get those, like the bureaucratic meetings of you have to talk to this person, you have to talk to that person. Not everybody's in agreement, so you have to figure something out. So that moment I think is done really well, especially because Lois is there. Lois also has the eye cameras in, so she's able to get at least chunks of the conversation down as part of the as part of what Torchwood is trying to do. Is they're trying to dig up dirt on these politicians so that way they can have some leveraging and bargaining power when they have to eventually get to them.
Right.
Which I like. It's a very, very nice detail.
And it's not beyond the realm of possibility. I totally could see our politicians having that kind of debate if that really happened, Yeah.
And it's the worst part is it's not unreasonable. It doesn't feel like a Thanos where it's like, I'm gonna come in and I'm going to inflict my will. They're like, we're at the mercy of someone else now. What do we do?
Yeah.
Either choice is all.
Yeah, there is no good answer. There's no good solution. But when that woman said, well, okay, let's establish right off the top that the kids of everybody in this room are not going to be included.
Right.
Like our kids in particular. And I was like, oh, I get that somebody would say that, but that makes it a little tiny bit easier for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I like that. It feels very human. It doesn't feel very like I said, doesn't feel forced. Preachy, doesn't feel pushed or forced. Yeah, that helped me enjoy the scene more, because not everybody comes across as meaningful either. They very much make it clear that the prime minister, he all he cares about is his public perception, because he knows his life theoretically is not in danger so long as they give the kids up, which is really, really awful. But that's how he is, and everybody else is a little bit more softer than that. So I like that moment. I think that's a really fun moment, and it gives way to the characters and stuff. And I also like that they're not very much interested in giving Capaldi's character Frobisher a real big opinion on it outside of everyone else, because even though he's the mouthpiece for the human race to the 456, the prime minister is like, I'm really, realistically speaking, going to be making the decisions around here, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah,
it really kind of hurts.
Yeah.
And they establish too, and it might be even in a later episode, but I think Decker says to Frobisher, those guys are elected, they come and go, but we'll always be here, and it just shows you, and even, well, I guess I'm getting too far ahead of myself, but even, Bridget Spears basically sings his praises at one point, saying he's a hard worker and nobody will ever remember him because he's just a peon.
Yeah, they're very good about that.
So let's slide over into day 4 now. The synopsis. Oh, first of all, I want to mention this was the highest rated Torchwood episode ever, with 6.8 million viewers, which I thought was kind of cool. all right. In this episode, Jack is forced to confess how he helped broker the deal in 1965 when the 456 offered an antidote against a deadly universal flu virus that would have killed millions in exchange for 12 children who they claim would live forever. Clem and the team watch via Lois's eyes that the aliens tell Frobisher they will wipe out the human species if their request is not met. And the camera reveals the children from 1965 are still alive and hooked up to the aliens who claim they're unharmed. Frobisher rejects Jack's offer of help in return for Alice and his grandson's release. In a cabinet meeting, the government officials agree that their children will be spared and that lower-class kids should be sacrificed instead. This is recorded by Lois and sent to safety with Reese, giving Ianto and Jack leverage to talk to the aliens. Jack and Ianto gain access to Tem's house, demanding that the aliens leave, but the latter's response is to unleash a virus which kills dozens in the building, including, sadly, Ianto. Clem is also killed by an ultrasonic frequency. The government feels forced to capitulate. There's little choice now but to give in to the aliens' demands. For John Frobisher, however, the choice he has been presented leads him to his own definitive solution to the situation. So, yeah, we kind of covered this a little bit just now, but this was another powerful episode, especially when you saw the kid. I mean, it wasn't just a little kid standing there. It was like he was emaciated. It almost didn't even look human anymore. And I think, is this the one where the aliens reveal why they want the kids?
No, that's episode 5. That's like 75% of the way through episode 5. That to me is the climax of the show.
Okay, so we won't say that right now just yet.
But yeah, I remember, I still have the memory of being a little kid and seeing that visual. That was, like I keep saying to us, show and tell. That's the show, and that is the epitome of the horror of the entirety of Children of Earth, is the fact that the aliens have this and this child. The other thing also is that they kind of loosely mention is this child was given to the 456 44 years ago.
Right.
Which is incredibly horrifying all in and of itself. And it's just, it's very, very. They're also, something I want to praise about Children of Earth is the design of the aliens is kept shrouded, but given details. Like, it feels like they did designed an alien for the 456 to look like, but they never actually showed it all to us. There's a lot of weird fluids get spewed about in that room. And yeah, we have like weird views of like what could be their head. You're not sure if it's their only head. You're not sure how many actual limbs they have or how big their body is or how they even functionally move. The only thing we really get clear is this poor kid who's, hooked up to this alien and has a big, mask on, big respirator that has a line that we can clearly tell goes to the rest of the body of the alien. And it's very, very disheartening. And that I really appreciate that. That's when Johnson kind of softens up of like, hold on a minute, I'm not just working for the government to try and cover up some bullshit conspiracy. This is real.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah. And one thing too, and another heartbreaking aspect of this episode was the death of Ianto Jones. Apparently it triggered quite a few protests from fans. They had a Save Ianto Jones campaign going. But the writer, John Frey, basically said he was executing Russell Davies' vision, and he noted that Ianto's death was a means for the viewer to see the price of Jack's immortality and seeing those that he cares for die around him. So even though it was tough, especially coming off of season 2, where 2 characters died in a heartbreaking scene, now you've got this guy that is sort of, like you said, he was kind of in the periphery, but he was really useful quite a bit, and then bam, gone.
Yeah,
there was one.
Sorry, Michael. For it.
I was just going to say, like, this middle second half of the story, the 5-episode story, is where certain things for me started being like, what? Wait a minute. And I feel like when Jack and Ianto went into the chamber to talk to the 456. I felt like, did nobody brief them on what the ultimatum was that the 456 gave originally? Because all they did was go in there and go, you know what? No, we're not giving you any kids. What do you think of that? So there. And then the 456 was like, okay, we're going to kill everybody in this building just to show you that we can do it. And then everybody starts dropping dead. And they're like, oh, never mind. We didn't mean it. And it's like, wait, well, didn't you know from the get-go that was the threat they made? And, they have that power, so you can't just deny them what they want and expect them to cave, Duh.
Yeah, yeah. I see your point there. I really see that though as that's what the audience wants somebody to say. They want,
Mm,
especially Jack, who is the epitome of action hero in Doctor Who universe.
right.
He comes up, he steps up to the 456, says, "No, this is the human race you're talking to. You're only talking to a couple bureaucrats. The real human race that actually lives out there will not let this happen." And I really loved that, and I was like, yes, feels really good for him to say that, because that's what we want. We don't want to have to give up kids or let the human race die. It's not fair.
Mhm.
So
And
when he does that,
they shot at the tank too, and it was bulletproof basically.
oh, that
Yeah.
I was like, why are we
Why?
doing that?
Right.
I was like, what are we gonna like this? The 456, they're really, really vague about whether it's this one dude or like a lot of them.
Yeah.
Right.
But all I'm saying is, even if it was this one dude, are you serious? You're gonna kill this motherfucker? He may have a fail safe. If he dies, then the human race dies anyway. So I really didn't see that as their brightest plan. But I don't know. I still see it as Jack essentially saying, we're Torchwood. We're not the government, and we're not gonna roll over and let this happen.
Right.
Right.
That's
Right.
what I saw a lot of that. And I see your point that I don't remember how much they actually were like, hold on, we take it back, but they were like, a little bit like, okay, you are serious. You really will kill most of us. And Yanto's death was really sad. I forgot he died. So I was very, very sad that Yanto died.
Yeah.
Um,
And like you said, they kept it vague about the aliens. I mean, they even said they couldn't detect any ships outside the planet. And I think that added to
Mm,
the fear that the humans were feeling. And it was because they don't even know where these guys are coming from, how many there are, yet they can just kill everybody in this building somehow,
Yeah, that's a good point. Is up to this point, the Doctor Who universe, which historically Doctor Who is in its entirety is notoriously bad for letting events that happen to the world actually matter to the common people.
mm.
We've seen alien ships get blown up in the sky now. So I actually appreciate that units we're used to this. We have weaponry to defeat giant ships. Where are they? Oh, what do you mean they're not here? We just get this one firebolt from the sky and Homeboy shows up in the glass tank where
Mm.
it does give a good job of giving this completely new type of threat, instead of just the same old, oh, they've got a gun pointed at us holding us hostage. That's bio warfare. It's stuff you can't see. Also, when Yantos dies, their Decker's character, he runs to the they had these not spacesuits but hazmat suits
yes. Yeah.
that he runs and puts himself in one and survives, which I thought was ingenious. I didn't
Yeah.
like Decker though. He's
Yeah.
really, really
No.
kind of a douchebag through the whole thing.
But I like that Jack did that too. He stepped out into the hallway and shouted to the guys. He's like, "Shut down the air conditioning, shut down the ventilation, get oxygen tanks, get
Yeah.
hazmat suits. Just go. Just the
Yeah,
threat is in the air. Get out. Get whatever you have that can combat this."
Yeah.
yeah, and not really nobody listened. So
Nobody listened.
it
But
was
as you were
really
saying, Spence, that was stupid for them to shoot at the tank. What if the alien had a fail safe or something? Which is okay. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, I was thinking they gave humans the specs to build that chamber. Why the crap didn't the humans put a fail safe into the chamber so that they could screw the aliens over somehow when they got down here? Maybe there's a little tube on the side where they could send another gas in to mix in with the perfectly balanced atmosphere they created for them that would set it all on fire or mess them all up or make the glass so it's not freaking bulletproof so that if they had to break it to hurt them they could but
yeah, yeah.
I was thinking the same thing.
I accept the notion though that the humans were too scared to disobey
right
because
because they have no way of
knew so
knowing. Yeah, right.
Something I really like is when Frobisher is talking to the 456 and he's like, what do we call you? What do you call yourselves? And they're like, we don't care what we call ourselves. You call us the 456. We're the 456. And
Yeah.
very,
Right.
very much like a locker room bully. Very much
Mhm.
like they just set the tone. They decide what's going to happen, and they'll let these puny little apes run around and try and figure their way.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy how they 4, 5, 6 do talk down, and I just think I can never come up with cool names for shit. So however they came up with just here, all right, pitch this 3 numbers, 4, 5, 6. What do you think?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like, how do you get away with that? How do you make that sound cool?
And the other thing that was cool about that is they refused to be identifiable. Like, if we tell you what we really are, hypothetically, you might have connections or resources where you could go look us up and find things out about us. But we're not going to tell you what we really are. We're just going to use the nickname you have for us, and that's enough. You don't need to know any more than that.
That's another really good plot point that they could have been a plot hole is Martha Jones just so happens to have a cell phone that can call anywhere in time and space.
Right.
I wonder who she'd call if the Earth was in danger. So I'm glad that they established that anything that could have the Doctor show up is not available.
Right.
It very narratively helps.
And that being said, that's going to lead us right into episode 5 here. And I have a clip that I'm going to share. I'm going to play.
Episode 5.
Find it now. Hold on. Where did it go?
Whenever the Doctor, while he's doing that, whenever the Doctor on Doctor Who faces some kind of enemy and says, no, we're not going to do what you want. He's the Doctor. I mean, he has like so much experience and resources and knowledge and all this stuff, so that when he says that, it's like he's not talking out of his ass. He has a backup idea, or he has, so I feel like it's a little more solid, when he says that. But
it really does allow. Jack, we kind of all know that Jack is bluffing for the most part. He's not bluffing that people will fight, but he's definitely bluffing that they can win effectively and decisively.
Right.
So I like that. I think it really puts Torchwood on the back foot, but not so much that we get to see our protagonists absolutely be useless, because they're not useless.
Right.
They just so happen to have 3 entities working of us, the aliens, and the government, and sometimes we're working against each other.
And they didn't use Doctor as a crutch. They could have just said, "Oh, we'll call the Doctor and he'll come and fix." Like, it's not Doctor's show; it's Torchwood's show. So they kept away from that.
Right. Yeah. And this is going to lead us into this clip, which I think is one of the most powerful pieces of this series, this 5-episode arc. And I'm going to play it for you right now, if I can find the there it is, and hopefully you guys can hear it. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one thing I always meant to ask Jack. Back in the old days, I wanted to know about that doctor of his. The man who appears out of nowhere and saves the world, except sometimes he doesn't. All those times in history when there was no sign of him, I wanted to know why not. But I don't need to ask anymore. I know the answer now. Sometimes the Doctor must look at this planet and turn away in shame. I'm recording this in case anyone ever finds it, so you can see. You can see how the world ended.
That just, I get the hairs on my arms are standing on end every time I watch that.
That was really well done.
Yeah, and I remember as a little kid hearing that phrase, like, sometimes the Doctor must turn away from this planet and look away in shame. And I remember I have this vivid memory of David Tennant looking at the Earth from the TARDIS and just like turning away and like walking away. And for some reason, I thought that happened. It didn't. I fabricated that, but it was still very, very cool for me to like think about that, because I've thought about that since I was a little kid. So I've remembered that, and I did understand that much. So I thought that was very, 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 very smart to address the Doctor Who audience. Torchwood stopped feeling isolated. Children of Earth, they're very good about having this very serialized thing. Episode 5, the Doctor Who fans get recognized, but then all the Torchwood fans who are not Doctor Who fans are now feel a little bit more connected, but also very much Gwen does a good job of being the everyman. Of like, we really don't know much about this Doctor. especially if you're not one of his travelers. We get an inside look every time, but to the rest of the world, what the hell? We get crises every other day.
Yeah.
And I always pictured David Tennant as well, just sort of kind of looking away from the earth and like the crying Indian with the tear rolling down his face.
Yeah. It's very much one of those things. And that's the other thing is very much with a time travel show, it's very confusing. So I'm glad that they really try and address it like philosophically, but not literally.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't he help? Well, morally speaking, he didn't help because we're awful, but
so I like that. It's even Christopher. I can picture Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant like in that moment of like they're partial to humans and they're partial to England and to Earth and everything. But there were moments occasionally where they'd be like, "Oh God, stupid idiots! Like, what do you like? Why do you have to do this?" And they're like they love us, but they know that we're so. They can't deal with us sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Like my favorite Doctor is Peter Capaldi. So getting to watch him in Torchwood Children of Earth was a real joy. I didn't realize he was in it. So I was like, oh, that's my guy. I love him.
Oh, that's funny.
Capaldi is my favorite Doctor. With that, by miles and miles, he is my favorite Doctor. So He's like great. Watching him, and I can absolutely picture him just one of his few quiet moments of like, no, for once, I'm not gonna defend you from this one. This is not how we do it. I help you if you're gonna come in, if you actually want to be helped. If you want to find a solution, but they didn't. The people in charge didn't shoot for that, and it shows. And I like that. I like this philosophical thing of like, what would we do? What other options would we have?
Right. And he's like, the Doctor's like, you're on your own. If you're gonna do that and you're gonna decide to give your kids up, fuck you. You're on your own.
Yeah. I'm not gonna back you up every single time. Yeah.
It keeps that plot hole from ruining all the fans of the franchise and their experience.
And that's a difference, I think, between the older Doctor Who series and the newer one. Is there's a darkness about the Doctor, that starts with the Christopher Eccleston, reboot and continues through that. He's been through some serious shit and he's seen things all over the universe. And there's he can be funny and playful and but there's this part of him where the shit hits the fan and things get really serious. And he's just like, there's this whole other aspect to him that is not the playful, your best buddy. And he has his moments where he's like, you know what, humanity, fuck you. Whereas in the older series, he would always be like, well, I gotta save him,
yeah, it's a good point of like this is it feels like it gives the Doctor Who fans some agency in what's going on, and it definitely connects Torchwood to the greater universe that Torchwood was intended to be. And this is the adult content that the Doctor Who fans wanted out of Torchwood. They wanted to see these judgment calls that need to be made that you can't really do in a family show. You can't have like, we're going to, we want to kidnap all of your, a chunk of your children and walk away. And what are you going to do about it? You can't really do that in Doctor Who. So I'm glad they address it, but they don't harp on it. Past that like first minute, it very much is like goes back to the main plot line that we've been following. Yeah. And all that. So I really enjoy that aspect. It made me feel good.
And that video clip I just played of Gwen, they play that at the beginning of the episode, and then we see her record it later on. But it really sets the stage because now at this point, especially if you're a Doctor Who fan, you're like, when the fuck is the Doctor going to come and save everybody? And you watch that and you're like, he ain't coming. Yeah. So the synopsis is, with little choice now but to give in to the aliens' demands, the British authorities begin to round up the children under the pretense of giving them inoculations. Panic begins to set in as parents begin to wonder what's really happening to their kids. Captain Jack and Lois are arrested, and Reese gives up the tape of the cabinet meeting. UN Colonel Oduya discovers the sinister link between the aliens and the Scots children who disappeared. The aliens use the kids as drugs. The Prime Minister appears on television announcing that the next day all British children will be inoculated, which is the cover story for their abduction and delivery to the aliens. Reese and Gwen find that Rhiannon and her husband have been babysitting the neighborhood children. The three try to get the kids to safety while the neighborhood husbands fight off the soldiers. Gwen makes a video in which she states that the reason the Doctor doesn't always save the world is because he turns his head away in shame. Frobisher learns that his kids aren't safe from being sent to the aliens as he previously thought, so he requisitions a gun, brings it home, and shoots his kids, his wife, and himself. Ultimately, Alice persuades Agent Johnson to release Jack, who uses desperate measures and an unbelievable sacrifice to save the world, leaving him guilt-ridden. As a consequence, the future of Torchwood is in jeopardy. I got to say, even like this episode, I definitely had a tear or two in my eye through this whole thing. And the scene, even just reading the sentence of the scene where the fathers, while Rhiannon, Reese, and Gwen are trying to get the children to safety, and the fathers basically go up against the soldiers, that like gets me right there every time.
Yeah, it's a payoff to what Jack said in the episode previous, because Jack gets humbled fucking dearly with Yanto dying, and episode 5 is a really nice quiet moment of them reflecting on how awesome Yanto has been for them, especially because I had just finished season 1 and 2, and Yanto has a really unique kind of character arc as being part of the team, so I really enjoyed that. And then you get to see his family and what's been going on with them, and that moment when they're fighting off the soldiers is really, it's the payoff to Jack being like, no, the human race will fight. They will. This is, you see it now. This is now, we've had the tell, now we get the show.
Yeah,
I like that. I love that part.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole sequence was just unbelievable. I mean, I just, every time I watch it, I'm blown away. And even still, like, I forgot what was going to happen. I'm like, oh shit, how are they going to get away? And I even loved it when Gwen's friend there, the police officer, decided to join in with the husbands. And
yeah, that was Andy. He was a really fun character from even the first episode of Torchwood, when Gwen was a constable, and then she eventually moves over to Torchwood. It's a very funny move over, and allows for her to be an everyman. But he's been in and out of pretty much quite a few of the episodes, and I remember seeing him, and it very helped keep English. It kept the consistency of Torchwood. So I was glad when he showed up, because he was a really unique contact for Gwen. He was in the local police. He had he was able to give her a boots on the ground view of things when she was kind of in this lofty Torchwood position. And so I'm glad that he showed up again. Like you said, when he joins in, he's like, you know what, we're not the military. We're going to defend our home and our people. And the kids running away, very, very scary, very sad, especially after that intro, which makes you think they won.
Yeah.
The way Gwen states it sounds like the 456 got away with 10% of the children of this world.
Oh yeah. And like the shots of the soldiers literally ripping the children out of the parents' hands was just, you couldn't get any better than that in terms of storytelling and visceral grabbing at the audience's emotions.
I wonder if they told the child actors what was going to happen in the scene, because the screaming of the kids was so realistic, Yeah, the guys can't grab them, pull them away. So like, ah!
Yeah,
it's like, that kid is really upset.
Yeah, they did a really good job with that. Whether I really am curious now, actually, what they told them, because if it's like, you gotta go get a shot. Sorry, kid. Your mom's like, no.
Yeah,
any kid. And I like also, they have a very loose, I don't know which episode they specifically say it, but they have a very loose, like, kids ages like 4 to 11, which allows the audience to have a clear sight of what defines a child.
I was wondering that too at a certain point, like at what age is the cutoff, Yeah,
exactly. Like it very much helped with our understanding of who is the victim here, who's the real vulnerable group. And but it also diffuses a little bit of that, like, okay, we don't have to consider the possibility of like actual infants being involved in this scenario. And it also excludes quite a few children that could be involved and things like that. And it gives a little bit of reprieve, but like the worst part is the fact that it does give reprieve. That fact creates the horror.
Yeah,
which is awesome.
And I don't know if they established it as fact, but I think at one point they theorized that Clem, the reason Clem was able to get away at the beginning in 1965 was because he was right on the cusp, wasn't it? He was like 11, almost 12 or something.
Yeah, they loosely mentioned that he was his age particularly helped him. He wasn't in, controlled, because they can control kids clearly. So at a certain point, why do they need Jack to do it? It's probably to get them easier to keep a low profile. I also love just the view of the fact that we know what's coming, and we don't need to see where they're taking the kids too much. We see these like camps of people and these particular locales, but we know that there's no spaceships that are going to come down. There's nothing to shoot at. There's nothing to fight. It's just bright bouts of light, which is abstract enough that it freaks us out, but clear enough that the audience isn't lost on what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I love that. I love
the way the aliens sort of beamed into the MI5 building, they just beamed them out.
And the kids just in 1965 just walk into the light, kids. You'll be fine. It's very fucked up.
I wish they had explained a little bit more. Like, okay, they tell us that the 456 says that they're essentially using the children as drugs. Like they say, because what do you want them for? Oh, well, their bodies produce certain chemicals and the chemicals feel good. And then I started thinking, okay, what's the difference between, like, is it growth hormone, or like what's the difference between a child's body and an adult's body? Like, what do children's bodies produce that is different from adults? Like what is it that makes, or maybe it's just that they're going to live longer or something, or I don't know. It just made me think, I wish they had explained that a tiny bit more. Like, humans are humans, right? So like why children specifically,
Yeah, I didn't see a need for that. I see your point that it can be like well, hold on, tell me a little bit more. But I think the fact that they focused on the visceral reaction of the unit officer, because what I like though is that the 456 never used the term drug. They just keep saying, we like the hit.
The hit, yeah, that makes it scary.
When I heard the hit, I was like, wait, and it was starting to, like, the gears were turning in my head, and I'm slowly starting to like sink back into my couch. I'm like getting really freaked out, and he spells it out. He's like, you mean like drugs? And he looks horrified, and then I look horrified. It's very, very emotionally intense, and that to me is the climax of the show, when you find out why. Yes, it's crazy, but it's a process also. Like, the climax of the show is the climax of the season is, it's very hard to have like one singular moment, but for the audience, that moment of figuring out why is so impactful, and it really does have a really good payoff of, like, it spills out all the emotions that we've been bottling up for the past 4 episodes. It spills out like, oh my god, this is absolutely fucking crazy, and it's also very relatable. It's very much like, it's not a foreign concept. They don't need they don't need them to save the world. They don't need them to protect their planet. They don't need them to do any kind of crazy science fiction thing. It's, we turn you into drugs.
And that's them as like raw materials, for their own.
And one of the politicians says it too. They're like, they're just basically drug runners,
Yeah, they're.
And maybe that's why they want more this time, is they don't just want them for their own pleasure. Maybe they want to sell some, and they want a larger quantity.
I don't really want to know why. I'm glad they never get into that, because the fact that it is up to the imagination makes it that much worse.
Right.
They're very good. This is the best epitome of leave it up to the imagination.
And it's horrifying, but at the same time, it almost seems too simple. So I like that they say that it feels good, and then the unit guy goes, "You're using them as drugs," and then it seems like the 456 gets upset inside the chamber, because the way he says it is like, seriously, you're just a fucking drug addict? Like, there's a little bit of like, really? The 456 like, so splashing against the windows.
That's a really good point. I remember I remember not being able to really tell what the 456's reaction was to that, because you saw it as they thrashed against the idea of drugs. For some reason, I remember the 456, I swear to God, it fucking smiled when he said that. Like, I got this immediate vibe of like, it was like smiling on the inside of the cage. And that is where I paused it for like 2 minutes to kind of like catch my breath, because it was very, very
I might be
rough.
I might be mixing up like the timing of
No,
that,
I think
No,
you might be right, but it definitely had a reaction to that moment, and it freaked me out. I swear to God, they
Yeah.
were almost smiling. It's like you could hear the inflection of like, that inflection when like somebody's like kind of happy about something.
Yeah.
They're just so excited to tell you.
Oh, when
about
they
it.
were saying it,
Yeah, when they're like, we like the
it
hit.
feels good.
We like
Yeah.
the hit. I'm like, oh no. And it's a horrifying concept, and it's something you can realistically speaking only do in science fiction. I think that is what makes this really that much better, is that you can't effectively have some sort of realistic modern day plot that requires this amount of children for something that isn't population control.
Right.
Yeah.
So I love that they have this familiar concept, but in this terribly abstract shell.
Now, I'm going to throw this idea of mine out there, and I want you guys' opinion on it. I feel, and watching this episode and watching the guy from Unit was really pissing me off. And I was thinking, man, if Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart were here, none of this would have happened. He would have fucking kicked those aliens' asses to the other side of the galaxy. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think while everybody was negotiating, he would have been trying to figure out a way to screw them over. Like, I don't know, just, reverse the streams or whatever, like cross the streams,
right?
Like get under them or get over them or trick them into something, or, like set up a way like, oh, let's make them think they're going to get the kids. And then, I don't know, like, I think he would have been doing both, sort of like, keep me posted on the on the meetings that you're having, but I'm going to try to figure out a way to like fight them.
He wouldn't have turned over as easily as these guys did.
No.
I'm not really familiar with that character, because that character really never shows up in New Who, and I've not seen that much of the classic Who.
Oh, you gotta.
That's true. He doesn't really.
Isn't his daughter the head of Unit now?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kate Lethbridge Stewart. And I'm not a diehard fan of classic Doctor Who, just because most of it is meant to be kind of corny, and it kind of lives up to that reputation a little bit, whereas the new show doesn't do that as much, which is also why I really like Torchwood, because especially Children of Earth, because they address these very, very difficult concepts of what would you do. And I can go back to Children of Earth and it's still good. I think the rewatch value of this series is so freaking well made and well directed.
There were some serious dilemmas and storylines in the classic Who also, but they had such a low budget and it was hard to make it look as bad as it was supposed to be. So a lot of times it looks hokey and stuff, but like in Genesis of the Daleks, there's a point where Tom Baker's Doctor has an opportunity to like wipe out the entire Dalek, store, like all the little organisms that are waiting to become full-fledged Daleks, and it's basically genocide, but he knows that if they become Daleks, they're gonna, kill millions and millions and millions and millions of life forms all over the universe, but he still stops and hesitates, like, do I have the right to do this? Do I have the right to destroy this whole civilization of this one life form to save all the others, because I know what they're going to do in the future? Or is there something else I can do in the here and now that might stop them from becoming that? Like that, that kind of dilemma. It did happen occasionally.
I'm not saying I'm not saying it never happened in the old show, but it's those judgment calls that need to be made that we get to see in Children of Earth. You don't see it as much in classic Who. So that is why I lean towards this stuff. Plus, also, this is a childhood thing for me. Captain Jack is a character from my childhood. I was a little kid growing up when this stuff came out. When this was 2009, I was 8 years old. I was literally the demographic Christ. That was going to get kidnapped.
Yeah, you were.
So,
oh my God.
So like if that actually happened, I'm fucked.
And I don't want to get too far on a tangent, but Spence, I highly recommend you check out the Tom Baker episode, The Terror of the Zygons. So that is, I remember that being particularly scary.
Yeah, this Torchwood Children of Earth does channel that like trying to scare you, but this time it feels like they're trying to scare the parents
Yeah.
because when I was a little kid, I really didn't get what was so scary about it and all that stuff, and the fact that they almost feel like that, like I said, they didn't show the 456. They did the 456 had basically no physical presence beyond that one that one representative, which is also true of how they're threatening the world too with biological warfare. You never actually see the biological warfare going on; it just happens.
Right.
So I really enjoy that this threat was so invisible, and all that.
Yeah.
I think that's a very very important thing that we can all take away from when it comes to trying to make our own science fiction is that that kind of like keep the mystery alive, and
Yeah.
plus the how they get rid of the 456 is also very very
Yeah.
impactful.
But let's get into that now. I just want to put one more spoiler warning out there that we are going to spoil the ending of this because it's just unbelievable. So, Spence, do you want to take it away and describe what happens?
Yeah, this one definitely didn't like give me the shivers as hard when it happened, but it's a very sad moment instead of being this horrifying moment. It's a very sad moment. Basically, the 456 is the name of the frequency that they would use to communicate with this alien race that then takes on the name of the 456. So that's when Jack and the MI5 tech chief
Decker.
Decker put together the idea that they sent a signal. The 456 sent a signal that killed Clem, so they could theoretically reverse engineer that, put their own signal up, and they would need to amplify it to the 456, potentially killing them. It's very very plausible and very possible, and it very much is a very narratively speaking a good way to tie everything together. Of the way they get rid of them is the way they came in.
Mhm.
But the problem is they didn't have a big enough antenna to actually amplify this until Decker aptly points out, and this was when I really fucking hated him, aptly points out that Jack's grandson, who is in the perfect age category for what the 456 want and was connected to all of the crazy ramblings that we had seen, can be used as a satellite and transmitted to all the other children, and then subsequently to the 456. So Jack makes the hard choice and does that, knowing that it would kill his grandson.
Well, and in particular, Decker says, "Whoever it is, that child's gonna fry."
Yeah, I hated that. I like his lack of sympathy just pissed me off. Yeah, essentially reverse engineering that frequency and sending it all through one child all to the others and then to the 456 does, we're not quite sure what it does to the 456. It's like it explodes, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it does. It's a really cool moment of the 456 having spewed fluids all over the tank. They were yellow and greenish for the most part. These ones were red, so you can infer that it was now bleeding instead of something normal for it. And it sounds like it blows up, and then it does the teleport thing. The way it came in, the same way it goes out. But in the process, it kills what was his grandson's name?
Steven.
Steven?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got all the children on the earth doing this high-pitched scream all at the same time, looking up at wherever the 456 may be in the sky.
All of them were looking towards Thames House.
Yeah.
Which is where where all of these negotiations with the 456 were taking place. And it is really really creepy, but it's also incredibly sad because, mind you, the soldiers have to hold back Steven's mother.
Yeah.
He's like, because Steven thinks Jack is his uncle because of the fact that Jack looks so young and and all that stuff. So that's a key plot point, is that he's like, what's going to happen, Uncle Jack? And he's just like, stand there, kiddo. And I like to think of my little nephew, your grandson, Rigord. I had a tear in my eye. I'm like, no. No, I would let the universe burn before I would let that happen. I said that to myself after I finished the episode of I would not be sacrificing my grandson. And I remember when I was a little kid and you explained to me, what had happened, because you're like, because I didn't never seen that scene. But you had said, oh, he had to sacrifice his grandson. I pictured Steven had to become one of the kids that was hooked up to the 456 and just made him explode. I don't know. I just kind of went with that. So then when you do it through the signal and you watch basically Steven's mind melt out of his ears,
Yeah.
very, 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 very sad. And I don't remember exactly how they did, but I remember the audio kind of slowly faded out, and you have these these silent screams of Steven's mother, and Jack's got the tears in his eyes, and Gwen and Reese are like stunned, don't know what to do and how to respond to that, and everybody's shocked that the 456 go away. It's very sad.
And Jack couldn't even look at Steven when he was doing it.
Yeah.
If you watch that again, he can't look at him.
It very, very much, once again, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
The judgment call is one kid or the 10% of the world's kids, which is millions, close to 1 billion people.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So it's very much is another really good moment for Torchwood to be an adult show. Although, admittedly, it did feel a little rushed. From a narrative perspective. I do think that they kind of were like, oh, the 456 are it's a communications channel. We can just use the signal that they used once, and it's gonna kill the kid. So it did feel a little bit like the stakes jumped up 2 steps really fast, and then it ended really fast. So I don't know how I feel about that for overall as my personal review of it, but it still felt plausible and narratively satisfying, so it's not that bad.
Yeah, I now that you said that, I think I agree with you on that point, that if it had kind of somehow they had built it in a little more gradually, it would have been, I don't know. Somehow it doesn't, for me, it was horrifying to watch what happened to the kid and how badly everybody felt, to the mother and the Jack and everything. And, but yeah, maybe, excuse me, God, maybe because it was a little rushed or something. There was a point in episode 5 where I started to go, there's little moments in here that are hitting me as melodramatic. Yeah, the stakes are high, and yeah, this is a horrible thing, but not overall, but just there were little moments here and there, and I was just you don't need to work that hard to milk the emotion out of me at this point. It's episode 5, I'm on board. You can, but I can't be real specific about when it was, but anyway, yeah, that was really hard to watch. Was it the kids all screaming the same? Was it the sonic pitch of that sound that did the damage, or was?
Yeah, they're not very clear on what it actually was, but yeah, that's my understanding, is that basically that pitch that the kids were all pushing through was essentially treating them like transmitters. If you send a signal that can kill one guy, we can probably figure out how to kill you with it too. And it was.
Well, I was going to say, it begs the question, well, first of all, they kind of based it on how Clem died, because they used some kind of ultrasonic frequency to kill him. And so that's when they figured out, well, what if we just sent the same signal back or something similar? I don't know how they figured out which signal would harm them. But it begs the question, though, if they had a group of kids, would they have all had a better chance of survival than just Steven?
Yeah, I understand why they at least have a valid reason of why narratively Steven had to die, because they established that they are within minutes of the kids getting picked up by the 456.
Yeah.
They are within the kids are getting put into these spots, into these locations, and they're going to be abducted within the hour. So that to me allowed this. It didn't feel out of place. So it while the ending did feel a little bit rushed, and they maybe could have slowed it down a little bit, it definitely at least was a good payoff to what we had seen. And it was still, it didn't feel also like there were no stakes to the entire thing. Oh, we found the signal, we killed the 456. The only, it wasn't all that bad. No, some kid did die, and it was really rough.
Not only died, but died in a horrible, torturous way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But I actually thought they were going to bring him back because he was related to Captain Jack. So I thought, it's going to be one of those things where, because he's somehow biologically connected to, Captain Jack, that he's going to die, but then he's going to come back. But they didn't do that.
Yeah, which I thought was a brave choice on the producer's part.
Yep. Once again, it makes it keeps Torchwood. This is the line between Torchwood and Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Is that they'll kill a kid on screen. It's
So
it's not just told.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Torchwood Children of Earth, critically acclaimed across the board, won a whole bunch of awards for all different aspects of the show. So, folks, I highly recommend it. So, Michael, why don't you tell us your final thoughts on Torchwood Children of Earth?
My final thoughts. I think the best aspect of the story was the dilemmas that the characters were presented with throughout the episodes. That, like, okay, what there was really a sense of, okay, what if you were put in this impossible situation? What would you do? And then within that, okay, even if you accept the fact that you're going to sort of comply with the conditions that were given by the 456, now within that, okay, if you say we're going to give the 10%, now within that 10%, how do we make that decision? You know,
Right.
That was to me the most compelling part of it. And like you said, of course, none of the parents want to give up their own, but they all understand that somebody has to go. And so it was like that to me was that's what made it the whole season worth watching, was just the dilemma that it puts the characters in. And then as the viewer, you get put in that situation too. Like, shit, what would I do? You know?
And did you feel that the horror elements that we touched upon, the chills and all that, do you think that warrants our discussing of this on Fright Lounge?
Yeah. I mean, I think fear, horror doesn't necessarily have to be, slashing and whatnot and, piles of bodies, but just the threat and the fear that everybody was under throughout the whole thing. I think it makes it a horror story. It's like a human drama and a horror story at the same time.
Right.
So yeah.
Spence, final thoughts?
Yep, I would agree with you, Mike, the entire way through. Torchwood Children of Earth is probably my favorite Doctor Who story that they've really ever told in the entire extended universe. And it's a very, very scary concept. It's a very, very emotionally drawn out. I think it's well acted, well directed, well written, really, for the most part. It's not above critique, but I do think it's a real stellar S-tier story that you get to watch. It's also pretty concise too, for 5 episodes at 55 minutes each. Really, really awesome. So I would recommend this to anybody who wants some sort of enthralling story that doesn't have too many hard to follow sci-fi elements. I think it does a great job paying off its audience who are Torchwood fans, and then also keeping you involved, even if you're not a fan of the series as a whole. And overall, I would say, yeah, it's pretty spectacular, and you should go sit down and watch it. Maybe not with your kid.
Yeah.
Sorry, Spence.
Fine.
But like I said earlier, this especially the 5th episode never fails to put a tear in my eye. And as Michael mentioned, I've long championed this as probably some of the best TV anyone will ever watch. It's got everything, man. It's got action, thrills, chills, more. I definitely recommend it. Like we said, you don't have to have watched Doctor Who to enjoy it. It's good to have the background, but it's not necessary. I did want to mention, and for some reason I lost it out of my notes. I must have deleted it or something, but there was a season 4. It was called Miracle Day, and that was done. It was a co-production with BBC and Stars. And that was like 14 episodes, I think, 10 or 14. Spence, do you remember how many episodes that was?
I want to say 11, maybe 12.
Yeah. It's called Miracle Day, which I don't really remember it a lot. I remember not thinking highly of it, so I'm going to have to revisit that. But there was supposed to be a 5th season. However, because Eve Miles became such a huge star after this, she was in such demand that she couldn't make her schedule work with it. And John Barrowman was on record as saying that there were a lot of egos involved on the higher structure of making a TV show, and they just couldn't, for whatever reason, they couldn't work it out. So the show has never actually been officially canceled. It still theoretically could come back. I mean, he's going to be older looking, but they could just explain, he was away for a few million years or something.
Yeah, the Children of Earth is spectacular. Miracle Day it tries to take the formula of Children of Earth, but it does something different with it. And I don't dislike it, but I do think Miracle Day is its own category, and it's scary and harder and hard to deal with, but I don't think it is nearly as horrifically impactful and as a Children of Earth. I think Children of Earth is really one of the only points, maybe a couple of good Torchwood episodes and a couple of good Doctor Who episodes, but Children of Earth I think is the only real big long story in the entire Doctor Who universe that we can really put here on the Fright Lounge effectively because of the graphic different types of horror, because a lot of horror is based around what you see and your reaction to it, whereas a lot of people misconstrue like terror and horror. Terror is like before the thing happens and horror is after, and I think this 5-episode series does a great job of being horrifying by showing you things and telling you things that are very, very scary, and it's your reaction that makes you want to keep watching and come back to it, at least for me.
Right. Yeah, I agree with both you guys' assessment. So folks, that was fun. Please, the video is going to be on here, so you can put your comments below the video on Facebook or on YouTube. We're also going to, as if you're a regular watcher of the show, you know that I'll take it and I'll slap the intro and outro on at the beginning and end. So that'll be good. And you can find my other shows, The East Meets the West, Then Is Now Podcast, and Cult Movie Lounge at havenpodcasts.com. And like we said, if you haven't had a chance to check out Torchwood Children of Earth, go and watch it. So thanks a lot, guys, for joining me today.
Thank you.
No problem. Always fun.
And I'm going to just cut to the outro picture, and then we can chat a little bit afterwards.
Okay.
Where did that go? Where did that go? Oh, right under my nose, behind my back.
Yeah. I still think about the visual of that kid in the 456 harness.
Oh God.